Western bigotry and martyrdom. What is martyrdom in Islam? In Islam, martyrdom is referred to as shaheed. It means someone who's willing to witness their faith through the ultimate sacrifice. The word shaheed and shahada, which is the first pillar of Islam, share the same Arabic root. It's about signifying one who witnesses the truth of God through their life and death. Because in the Quran, Allah is most often referred to as Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, which is the most gracious, beneficent, and the most merciful and mercy-giving. Because the core of Allah, like in the other two Abrahamic faiths, is divine compassion. The first pillar of Islam, Shahada, translates to, "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of God." And because Allah is a being of divine compassion, asserting there is no God but Allah means that the pursuit of Allah by the faithful is a desire to participate in this divine compassion. Martyrdom is the act of sacrificing one's life to testify and bear witness to one's faith in a noble cause. And to fully understand martyrdom, you have to understand jihad. Not the way Westerners think of jihad, but actual jihad. In Islam, jihad just means striving or struggling in the way of Allah, and it encompasses both an inner struggle and an outer struggle. The lesser jihad is the outer struggle. It is the material struggle. And the greater jihad, it is the inner struggle, the desire for self-improvement, the desire to be brought closer to that divine compassion. And not only is jihad separated into an inner and external jihad, there are also four types of jihad. There's the jihad of the heart. The most important form, this is the inner spiritual struggle to overcome personal evil, lust, greed, anger, and striving to be a better Muslim. The jihad of the tongue and pen, using one's voice and writing to spread the message of Islam, speak truth, offer good counsel, and combat falsehood. The jihad of the hand, taking action to combat injustice and wrongdoing, supporting good deeds and helping the community. The jihad of the sword, armed struggle in the way of God for self-defense, to protect Muslims, or to defend the faith, following the strict rules of engagement. Jihad is not the religious manic crusade that Westerners describe it as. Jihad is a spiritual practice that brings you in alignment with God. And it is the acknowledgement that the material world makes it difficult to bring yourself in alignment with that divine compassion. So there's a struggle. You have to struggle to come closer to God because of the world we live in. There are also three types of martyrs in Islam. There are martyrs who in this world and in the hereafter. There are martyrs just in this world. And then there are martyrs who are in the hereafter only. Martyrs in this world and in the hereafter. This category is for those who attain the status of martyr both in this world and after. It refers to those who take part in battle with the aim of upholding the word of Allah. Then there's the martyrs who are martyrs in this world only. This applies to those who engage in battle for the sake of personal prestige or show or ostentatious reasoning. Those who die while fleeing from battle, or those who have taken from the spoils of war before they are justly distributed. And then you have people who are martyrs in the hereafter only. They include people who die from disease, plague, drowning, animals, collapsed structures, fevers, a woman dying during childbirth. There are martyrs in the hereafter. Because all those pains, all the pains of that human conditioning it becomes the struggle for which it is difficult to bring yourself closer to divine compassion. How hard must it be for a woman dying of childbirth to, in that moment of excruciating pain, still believe in this divine compassion? That is what martyrdom is for. Knowing this, when I was younger, I would often wonder why the Western media would make martyrdom sound so perverse, why it was mocked and disregarded so cruelly. The first time I started hearing the jokes about martyrdom were about Iran, I'm sorry, Iraq, when America first invaded Iraq and I was a child. And I would hear all these jokes about martyrs and these dumb, ignorant Middle Easterners blowing themselves up for 72 virgins. Now, you know, Westerners can't tell Muslims apart, and I don't even think they try, because the 72 virgins is not from the Quran. It is from a hadith, and it is specific to Sunni Muslims and not Shia Muslims. That hadith does not exist for Shia, but it is specifically in Sunni Islam, not Shia Muslims. When America invaded Iraq, they invaded a nation that was mostly Shia Muslim. So the vast majority of the martyrs in the Iraq War, that would not have been on their mind. That was not part of their faith. It was an act to belittle their sacrifice. Because there's many cultures that support self-sacrifice. Every culture supports self-sacrifice. Every culture has heroes that have sacrificed themselves for the greater cause. And they are held up as the greatest of us. Whether you're in the West, or whether you're in the East, whether you're in Africa, Asia, South America, Europe. I have a friend from the UK, and they still talk about Guy Fawkes. You know, I have friends from India, and they still talk about all of the great Indian civil leaders who martyred themselves for Indian liberation against the British. If you talk to most Europeans, if you talk to Germans, French, God knows the Swedish, they all have historical figures that willingly sacrifice themselves and are historically regarded. Even in America, there's a history of martyrs. Though in America, the history of martyrs tends to mostly come from the subjugated and persecuted minorities, because often they're the ones who need to martyr themselves against the evils of the world. And so why does martyrdom in Islam get belittled and demeaned? It's because the Islam and the colonization of the Islamic world has been the great Western project of the last century and a half. It started in Africa, made its way to South America, and a century and a half ago, it started properly in the Middle East. And like they did in Africa, like they did in South America, like they did in much of Asia, to colonize a people, you have to destroy a people. You have to destroy their culture. You have to destroy their history. You have to destroy their literature. And you have to destroy their concept of self. And so the Western world comes into the Middle East and brutalizes it to the point where many people are willing to sacrifice their lives to stand against them. And instead of seeing the nobility in these people sacrificing their lives against an opponent that they know they cannot overcome, simply to testify to their belief and their love for their fellow man, that has to be perverted. It cannot be allowed to stand for the objective logical reasoning it is. And so martyrdom has to be demeaned. It has to be ridiculed. It has to be belittled. Jokes about martyrs and 72 virgins always go hand in hand, whether you're referring to Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims, men, women, children, it doesn't matter, because it's just the desire to demean the Muslim world. You know what it reminds me of is when I remember years ago when I was in middle school, I read a history book and I discovered a term that branded itself in my brain. And the term was drapetomania. And it was somewhere from like the 19th century by some Louisiana doctor. And it is a psychological diagnosis he came up with. And it was the desire for freedom, the unhealthy desire for freedom that an enslaved person would have. And it was just a disease, but a curable disease. Because at that time in American history, the descendants of the Africans were brutalized and dehumanized to the point where the desire for freedom, the natural human desire for freedom, was categorized as a mental illness. Otherwise, white America has to explain to themselves why these people who they believe should be slaves, who they tell themselves their God told them to make slaves, why do these people constantly fight that? If it is the natural state of the world, why do they constantly fight it? And so instead of understanding that what they're doing is wrong, they think or they say the people who are trying to be free are diseased. And it's what reminds me of when people talk about martyrdom in the Middle East. For decades now, men, women, and children have been martyring themselves throughout the Middle East to fight back against the rapacious nature of the West. And Western people see these mountains of martyrs who are dying daily, by the hour, and in places like Gaza, by the minute. And instead of acknowledging that the system they exist in is evil, they have to pervert it. Martyrdom becomes a mental disease of the barbaric Muslim instead of a sign of how barbaric the nature of those who are attacking them is. And so when I hear even the most leftist liberal, or those who consider themselves leftist liberals in the West, they make jokes about the martyrs, they make jokes about the 72 versions. Every time they hear about some Muslim dying against the imperial war machine. And it just reminds me that in the same way that the Western world doesn't try to understand Africa and Africans, that we truly have been dehumanized to the point where they're unable to see us for who we are. The same has been done to Middle Easterners in the past half a century. Until the Middle Easterners have no resources for the Western world to rob, they have to justify this rapacious interaction, this rapacious relationship. And so, like most predators, they find a way to justify their predatory behavior. You rarely hear, predators talk about what I'm doing is immoral. They eventually just say your weakness is the sin. And that really is what the Western world is saying when they mock Muslim martyrs. They're not mocking someone dying for their beliefs. They're mocking how little it matters to them.